Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Van Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Uh-huh. So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
Your favorite podcast is Critical Blast.
Good evening. This is Silverline, and it is Wednesday, which means Wednesday Wham. I'm your humble co-host, sitting in for Mr. Dean Zachary, who's enjoying his evening tonight. And as Dean says, we do transcend politics and the big two, and we love to talk comic books and all things pop culture, movies, books, storytelling, the craft and creation of our favorite way to tell stories visually, and with crafted words and all the delights of storytelling. And I said storytelling too many times. We have a small crew tonight, but I think some other folks will be joining us in a little bit. Before I forget, I always love to thank all of our supporters for our Kickstarter campaigns. And Barb, I missed you last week, so congratulations
Thank
on
you.
a successful campaign for Divinity. And we do have another campaign coming up. So everybody out there, if you want to head to any of our social media outlets or our website, you can find your way to links to our newest campaign and click Get Notified. If you're not familiar with Kickstarter, you can click on there and you will be the first to find out. Also, we always like to tease here and let people know when those launches are happening. So if you want to get your hands on the next round of stories, the February campaign is not far away. Tonight, Barb and Rob are here, and we have we are going to be talking about interactive storytelling. Now, Dean comes up with lots of great ideas. I think he sits around in a dark, smoke-filled room in his leather chair, and he just ponders the universe and comes up with all these great ideas. And then he crafts them these great questions. Oftentimes, his questions are much deeper than we actually go. What does that mean?
Yeah, we have a tendency to go off the rails really bad too.
And I know I'm 1,000 times worse than Dean. Dean's great at just come back. Interactive storytelling. When I say that, Barb, first thing that comes to your mind?
Well, I'm very old at this point.
38 is not old.
Oh my God. I'm in trouble.
So my very first interaction with interactive storytelling was way back before the internet, or just at the dawning era of the internet, when we had a live journal and stuff like that. And that was round robins. You would start a story, and then it would go to the next person in your chat group, and they would add to the story, and then it would go to the next person, and then they would add it. And so you didn't know where it was going to end up, which is basically the whole idea of interactive storytelling, is that you don't know the ending when you're starting the journey.
Right.
So, of course, after that, things started to evolve, and video games came on the scene, which were interactive storytelling, especially the ones like Dungeons and Dragons, gaming, stuff like that, which I was just telling before we got on the air here. I am actually, for the very first time, at almost in 12 days, at the ripe old age of 64, started listening to the Dungeons and Dragons Margaret Weiss Hickman series.
Dragonlance. Yep.
Dragonlance Chronicles. Yep. I am listening to those on audio book as I am doing my artwork. So I'm going along the adventures of Tanis Half-Elven and Raistlin and Caramon and those guys. So it's
those three books are seared into my psyche. I have read them a bunch of times. That and all of the Drizzt, the Dark Elf books, the Icewind Dale and the Dark Elf. If you haven't read those, Barb, those are fantastic. So, but I'm glad that you said it. But those. We got some. We got a hello here. Good.
Simulators. Hi, Dick.
Good evening. And then Steam Patriots VIP, Richard Dunn says, I think this is in reference to you, Barb. Before Al Gore, meaning the internet, I assume. There was a before the internet. How did we do that?
That's when they did the internet with smoke signals.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
I remember when this thing called letter writing, where we actually wrote to our pen pals and sent letters.
You'd send it away, and you'd wait and check the mail, and
Yes.
I may need, let's see, Vic says the only one I can think of is the Gen 13 interactive issue in comics. I missed that one. There's a interactive comic book. Go ahead and explain. But Barb, you mentioned Dungeons and Dragons, and that's great. It's a great starting point. Yeah, round robin storytelling. I love. Years and years and years ago, I remember reading a story. It was a little quick joke about round robin, and then the boy, of course, adds in like guns and explosions and tanks, and the girl adds in love and flowers, and then the boy, and they keep going back and forth. So interactive storytelling, Dungeons and Dragons is like the epitome, I think, of interactive storytelling. Now, we will get on to what the modern incarnation of interactive storytelling is: video games, and then there's this whole AI element, which I can't even wrap my brain around yet, but that is coming with especially AI plus VR, and having this randomized results. I mean, nothing digital is truly random, but for us, when there's a billion possibilities, Dungeons and Dragons is almost round robin. You do have the dungeon master or the game master trying his or her best to control trying. And
Emphasize the trying.
yes,
Yes.
the DM can spend hours and days planning, and then in a moment, in an instant, the game can go off the rails.
Blink of an eye.
Yeah, just
Yes,
one.
It's over.
So it's like herding. It's like herding cats.
Oh my goodness! Yes, but cats
Oh,
with magical abilities and
Yeah.
swords and the roll of a die there, and it could go crazy. Which is so great because it is interactive, cooperative storytelling, and I think
Yeah.
that's so much fun because you have everybody's input, their own personalities, the characters, you have the rules, the variables of the dice rolling, and that can create amazing stories that go somewhere where you, as the storyteller, the dungeon master, would not necessarily have ever even expected.
Oh yeah.
Barb, yes?
Yes, actually, if you want to take a step back from that, what led to Dungeons and Dragons was actually in 1979, it was the whole choose your own adventure game books.
Those, and I loved those too.
And those actually led to Dungeons and Dragons.
I had a friend in
that and miniature gaming, Napoleonic Wars type of
Oh
thing.
yeah.
That was a lot of the basis for Dungeons and Dragons, and then they added the role playing and the whole storytelling aspect, and it just blew it up.
And
it changed everything about gaming.
Talk too about how D&D has evolved from a lot more battle mechanics, which really make it's the simplest form of the game. I mean, that's something as a game creator you can control. How the role playing came into more and more of the game, but yeah, the choose your own adventure games. I had a buddy in elementary school, and he collected them. That was his thing. He had tons and tons of them, Nick, and I would borrow them from him. I would frequently, though, make a choice and then make another choice and come back to where I've already been, and I would go get How did I
and try it again?
Yeah, wait a minute.
Why not?
How did I do that? But they were so much fun. The choose your own adventure books, and those I feel like, and I could be wrong, were a flash in the pan. Speaking of literature-wise, and I feel like they've tried to make a comeback, but like many things, I think video games ruin that. Video games have their are amazing and fun, but they're a medium that's just much more exciting than a choose your own adventure book. And take it or leave it, good or bad. But Dungeons and Dragons, you talking about the Hickman and Weiss novels, and then all the spawning Dragonlance books that went from there, those started from them creating an adventure, and from their adventure, they chronicled the story and made it, adapted it for a book. But that's where that story came from.
And then they got to the point where you designed your own characters.
Oh, who's that?
Well, Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh,
you
yeah.
design your own characters, which everybody has their own characters now. So that's very much incorporating your own.
It was very limited at the start, and of course you could make adjustments and so forth. But yeah, I'm kind of a stickler when I DM. I kind of like people to stick kind of to the core rule book and kind of to the core characters, because when you start getting off these addendums,
I can do this and this and this and this.
Yeah, and I can't keep track of it. They always surprise me. Oh wait, but I can fly underwater at twice my movement and be the size of a mouse. You can do that every.
I'm God. I just took that
right.
away
Yeah,
from you.
and you're dead.
Yeah,
I do ruin a lot of fun.
Roll up a new character.
Yeah, and you're dead. Never had a session go as the DM planned. No, and a good DM will allow it. Sometimes the DM has to rein it back in, because then the story no longer works. There's got to be sometimes, but oftentimes a key character will get killed off, and you'll be, oh crap, that I needed that guy. The trick is, as the storyteller, is to just apply, give it to somebody else. And in the storytelling world, from people, and the three of us have crafted stories. That's good stuff to keep in mind, to be fluid. I talk a lot about, and we've talked about crafting stories and how I like to get the bones of my structure. I like to know where I'm beginning, where I'm going, and the major points in the middle. But I like to allow my characters to come alive. Now they're all in my head, but they do get their own personality as they go, as they work, and I like to see those characters then drive the story, and that's where I feel like getting good characters and knowing your characters well, you'll know, oh, he wouldn't do that or she would do that, and that sort of thing. So very similar to the interactive side of Dungeons and Dragons. And clearly it's having a renaissance, which is good. I was just saying what video games have killed. I think a lot of people, and I'm on the younger end of D&D. I came in on 2nd edition, advanced D&D, AD&D. I missed all the early days of it. But people older than me who were playing in the 80s and so forth, and you were kind of ostracized for being very nerdy, and that's what it was. Now they're all grown up and don't care, and they have kids, and so there's a renaissance. There's schools nearby that have D&D clubs, and they play at school, and I think it's great, and especially for for those of us. We write, we're crafty, we have our nerdy tendencies, right? I'm not going to hide that.
I was always a nerd.
Yeah, there are studies that show this, that the playing D&D allows people. I say D&D, that's just a go-to, but tabletop RPGs talk about a way to socialize in a forum that lets you be weird, lets you be goofy, lets you be silly, or pretend you're somebody else, and lots of people gravitate to that, or they otherwise wouldn't be talking and interacting and pretending. There's drama and so forth. It
allows you to socialize when you're an introvert.
Exactly. It allows you to be around people that you
become. You get outside yourself and put yourself in another character. It's not you anymore. So you can be as extroverted as you want to be and not worry about it. It's the character.
Exactly.
So, that's
it's the same as being in a drama club. I was very much an introvert, and most people remember me in school as the girl that would sit at her locker and read a book during a lunch hour. But I would get up on stage because that's a different world. Pretend world.
Yep. You're not you anymore. Yeah, and if you're able to do that, so okay, D&D. That's a great start. Tabletop RPGs where you pretend, and the story, the core of the story is there, and then very rarely does it follow along that. We got Pop saying, "Hey,
hi, Pops."
Hey, Pops.
And then what up? And then VIP Steam Patriots VIP Richard Dunn says, yes, my nephew. He's talking about my nephew. Met his wife from England. His wife also a Steam Patriots VIP. Whole family of Steam Patriots VIPs. While playing video games. Yep. Getting online, and so we'll get to video games because I think that could take up a big chunk of our talk here, because that's it. When I think interactive storytelling, really almost any modern video game with a storyline, and I'm sure we could argue even first-person shooters are a little bit of interactive storytelling, because your story is a battle and who won and who lost. There might be more to it, more nuances, but any modern video game,
like Halo,
you think of, all of the, now
you're blanking.
The big fantasy one that everybody plays. Oh my gosh! Give me a second.
Magic.
We'll get. No. The video game. We'll get to it. Just a second. I wanted to get to
Skyrim?
Thank you. Leave it to Rob.
Wow.
My son plays these things.
Yep. So my kids play.
See, and my son.
Yours are,
yeah, mine are grown. Their big interactive game growing up was the one Oregon Trail.
Oh yeah,
you die.
That's
You get
a perfect.
dysentery and die.
I would try to go as fast as I could. Everybody died, but I got there. Yes. Sorry. So yeah, Skyrim. Thank you, Vic. Totally blanked on it.
One of the most popular right now is The Last of Us, which they just made into a show.
I've heard good things about it. I really want to watch it. It's not on a service that I have right now, but I'm
Yeah,
considering
but then
it.
it's an interactive game.
Yep. Skyrim. Modern games, but before we get there, the advent of that, there were games on computers like on Oregon Trail, there were the text-based kind of choose your own adventure.
I hated those. Those were horrible. I'm a visual person. I need graphics, and all it was text. And
Well,
yuck.
So the one of the games that I absolutely loved, and it might be a little before both of Yinz's times, but I think it was 1990 maybe, called Quest for Glory. It followed on the heels of King's Quest, and they the name of the company changed a couple times. I think Sierra was the game that the company that made it.
I remember that name. I remember Sierra Games.
They made one of the first. Correct me if I'm wrong, everybody out there. They made one of the first interactive games that had graphics, and it was very low graphics, of course, but it was insanely popular. And so then they went on to make King's Quest, and that was one of similar to the text-based game. You would ask about, look at, pick up, and then Hero's Quest was like a 8-bit. Your little guy. It was 2-dimensional looking game, but the graphics looked somewhat. They were drawn with a perspective, and you'd walk your little guy, and the game opens, and there's the sheriff of the town is sitting there smoking a pipe, and you have to ask about the town, and whenever, because of the limitations of the game, if you would ask about the sky, it'd say, why do you want to know about that? Ask about something silly, a car, and it would say, I don't know about that. So you would learn, okay, that's not relevant to the game, and you would look at. And you have to type, look at. Later on, I learned that there was Control L, Control A, Control something like. I did not know that. So I was typing, look at, ask about. And the same thing. So you would go around the town and get little hints and clues and pick things up. And there was a typical game. You had to, oh, my cat ran away. Can you find my cat? No, you go find the cat, but the cat's up a tree. And so you can't climb up the tree. So you've got to go find a ball of, but you can't get the ball of yarn from the seamstress until you find her son-in-law or something like that, and you gain experience points and so forth. I loved Quest for Glory, originally called Hero's Quest, but they never trademarked their name, and Milton Bradley took it for Hero Quest, and it was too close, and so they had to call all the games Quest for Glory. There's your tidbit there. King's Quest was very similar, graphics based. You walked around the woods and the castle and so forth, and had to solve puzzles, save people, fight people. There was always a fighting, an action side of it. There was this one monster. You would have to wander through the woods, and it was just 2-dimensional, up, down, or left, right. And you'd wander through the woods, and this one monster moved much faster than you could. And so if you couldn't make the bend quick enough, it would always get you. It was infuriating. And there was a type of game that if you didn't save it at the right point, you'd get stuck on that screen, dying every single time because you saved it
over and over and over and over.
So you had to start the whole game over again. But those were fun, and they had quite the franchise. All of the Sierra games. We can take a second here. We got some questions. Rob, how's this page Boston Bomber going? Is that what you're working on?
Yeah, that's what I'm working on.
All right.
Just kind of knocking figures in. Cool. Getting things started, tightening it up a little. But yeah.
Very cool. And Pop says, hey to you, Vic. Hey, Vic. And then Rob looks inspired tonight. Yes, as always. It's the
okay. Yeah,
gods of art. Bless him. So we talked Dungeons and Dragons, and then the advent of the Choose Your Own Adventure digital versions on computers, and Oregon Trail on an Apple II with very low graphics and
Yeah, very pixelated.
very, very. We do need to not forget about the actual side of writing these stories, but we can move into video games. Even kids games. I think like similar to like the Leap Pad things had those sorts of choose your options there. But then, yeah, video games went from very basic premises, of course, like everything does. It starts with the fundamentals of a challenge, but especially as people have grown up with video games, we have an entire, I mean, now 2 generations, I guess, of people growing. They expect a lot from them.
Yeah,
And
they've become very sophisticated.
Yep. The 2-dimensional side scrollers still have their place, but games like Skyrim, and now with the virtual reality side of it, which have either of you thrown on a VR headset yet?
No, I want to.
No.
It's an experience. It's really it's outrageous, and I have some games that I can handle. Like, you know,
I'm afraid I'll get addicted.
Well, Rob, yeah, they're immersive. My brain and my inner ear and my guts can handle some games, and there are some games that I absolutely cannot do. And I know my limit with some of these games. I really, with glasses and stuff, they make adapters and all the things to make it much more comfortable. I just haven't done that. I can play for about half an hour.
Do they have that with like World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy?
I don't know. But I don't know what the setup would be. They have like, if you're talking like a top down kind of style, or you want to be in it.
In it.
Oh,
I wonder if they've adapted
that's a
those
good question.
two popular ones into
That's a good
VR.
question.
If not, they will.
They will. And that so there's a couple years ago I played a VR Skyrim, but it wasn't a native VR game. It wasn't made for VR, so it was real clunky. And it was a lot. You know when you see like a 3D movie, and a lot of times it just feels like it just take the 2D and make it move like that.
Yeah.
That's what Skyrim felt like. But it was pretty neat because you could just look around. The element of full movement is still missing, but they're fixing that with walking and so forth.
I would love to try a VR headset one of these days, because full disclosure here, about the only 2 video games I've ever played are Pong and Frogger. So, but I have been raised around my kids who played old, because I'm not a video gamer.
That was my favorite. Asteroids. Yeah.
My kids played a lot of video games. My son still plays video games, only he plays them online now.
Yeah.
And see, that's really getting, because you've got the headset on, you're talking to people.
Yep.
And see, that I think was the next step after playing video games by yourself, is connecting into the internet, and you're playing with a group of people.
Yeah.
And that
when they
that
first
same
started
thing,
doing D&D online, that was incredible. Yeah.
It was fun because now you can play with anybody anywhere, and I play with my brother who's in California and so forth. But yeah, adding the element of virtual reality makes it truly interactive. And we keep saying interactive, and that word has a lot to it. And even looking up, I tried to find a definition, and like Wikipedia and so forth even says, no one has really defined so when they say it, what do you really mean? So we could say it's interactive because I'm part of the game in VR, or meaning
you have input,
and it responds to my input and changes. So the nuances of the interactivity of the game a lot of them are there, but there's jokes about NPCs, non-player characters, video games having a limited number of responses still. So that takes you out of the game a little bit. It's funny, but just like in video games, like people are chasing you, and if you hide for just long enough, then everybody forgets about you. You know, that's not how it should work, but those are video game rules. But where you have an effect on the game, a lot of games will have a like a social standing, which I think is pretty cool. You know, if you keep doing bad things, people don't like you and they will treat you poorly, and then you won't be able to come in here, or they'll keep you away. Or if you keep doing good things, you know, your reputation. And the games have had that for a long time, but it's getting more and more, again, more refined, and has a bigger role on the gameplay. I remember
nobody wants to be Negan from Walking Dead, which is also, by the way, now an interactive game.
Yeah, I've not played any of the frightening or horror games. Vic says VR headsets make me dizzy. So dizzy. Yes. Like I said, I thought there's a flight simulator game that I really like. I thought that would make me vomit instantly. I mean, because it's everything, and you are looking around while you're doing a barrel roll. But there's another one that's a first person hack and slash fantasy game, and it really just seems like the game is just to walk around and chop everybody up in sword fight. That one makes me violently ill almost instantly, and so I can't do that. Vic's asking if we know about Heroes World. I do not know what that is, so feel free to toss it up in the comments.
I've heard of it. I don't know much I don't know anything about it.
So from the crafting of the story side, I feel like that is a daunting task.
Yeah, because you've got to come up with all these branches
Yep.
of the story. You've got to think of everything.
Yes.
And that's a horrendously huge task.
which is why I guess with the huge video games, the hundreds of people involved, and then the play testing that has to go into it. It's beyond the scope of my understanding. And I even just thinking of writing multiple plot lines that line up, which I love when TV shows do that. I love when books can do it, when they can run concurrently and match up when it's done well in a show, and when it all ties back together, or when one affects the other without them knowing it. I think it's very clever. I think
I would actually be fairly good at that because I have a habit of going down the rabbit hole. When I write, I can go, I am the very logical writer. So I have to make everything make sense so that I'll go down all these rabbit holes.
Yeah.
Well, what happens? This. Well, what if we did this? So I would actually think I would be pretty good at it. I'm very good about going down the rabbit hole, or a whole warren of rabbit holes.
Yeah.
The rabbit warren, okay.
Yeah. The rabbit hole is, yes, and I have to do that too. I will, especially if some little thing interests me, I have to really, really stay focused to my plot line and not tell all these other stories. But if it's a format, if it's a medium that allows that, like video games and so forth, go for it. And I think being an individual writer, you'd be limited, and so that's where you get these giant tomes, Robert Jordan kind of stuff that tell all the stories. Still not quite interactive, unless it was somehow choose your own adventure. The true interactivity, I believe, I would say, the reader or the consumer must feel as if they have a role in it. Now, in a choose your own adventure book, you are really limited by
what's offered.
One or two what's offered. Video games are limited by the scope of the game, and they keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
The parameters.
And so these free world. I remember maybe a PlayStation 2 game where you could blow up big portions of the world. The walls, your explosions would put holes in the ground. And I remember being just stunned that you could blow up a wall when you were in a gunfight and that, or shoot through the doors. And that was PS2, so that was a long time ago. But that's allowing that you're suddenly allowing the player to have a little more control in the game, and I think a lot of people really want that. Steam Patriots VIP Richard Dunn says, like the
I was going
Ryan
to say,
Reynolds movie.
I was going to bring that up.
Free
Free
Guy.
Guy. That was the first time I'd ever come across the term non-player. What do you
NPC?
call it?
NPC, non-player
yeah.
character. Yeah.
Yes, that's the first time I came across that. I loved that movie. That was.
I've not seen
movie.
it. I have heard nothing but good about it. So I guess I got to check it out. It takes a room full of writers to keep the storylines going. They're writing the plot, like the story for the world he's in. Is that what's happening? Okay.
Yeah. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the story Bible for some of these games?
Yeah.
That big.
Yeah. And I'm just amazed too, just by the scope of just watching my kids play Skyrim. The characters that they interact with have names and a different voice and many things that they say. Just the sheer production that goes into this game with the voice actors.
Oh yeah, it can't be done by one person alone.
Right. And with the writers saying, okay, you interact with Barkeep. He says, would you like a drink? Now you say yes or no. Yes. What would you like? Oh, blah, blah, blah. And then ask a question, and then to have it all intertwined. It really is a stunning thing from the storytelling world, and to keep the continuity.
The continuity. Good God.
Yep. Yeah. So Vic says there are these choose your own adventure comics Ben Bishop have been putting out that seem to work well. Choose your own adventure comics, Ben Bishop. I'm going to have to look those up, and I'm going to type that into my search engine right now so I can remember. He also plays 10th goal for the Buffalo Sabres. That's interesting. Comics. Choose your own adventure. Okay, I'm going to look that up. Split decision graphic novel by Ben Bishop was on Kickstarter. Cool. Thank you for that. We'll check that out, because we do like to talk about comic books here. I think I just think what it would cost, right, Barb? How
I know
you gotta tell a story in 22, 24 pages or whatever to make it a graphic novel. But now to ask your artist, okay, do it all again.
Only this time we're going to go off this way.
Right.
At this panel.
Yep. Your hero is there was another PS2 game, I think it might have been Champions of Norath or Baldur's Gate 2, if you remember, where you could choose a good or a bad path. And that's similar. I mean, that's two paths. So think of that in the comic book world. Yeah, okay. Now your hero chose to be good. Draw the rest of the comic. Your hero chose to be bad. Draw the rest of the comic. We got a different. Didn't Ben Bishop? He did Ninja Turtles. That Ben Bishop?
The Last Ronin? Oh yeah, that I just got done reading that.
Different Ben. Are you saying not Ben Bishop, the hockey goalie? I was joking about that. Okay, yeah, I will definitely look that up. That's awesome.
Here's a question I have. When does letting the audience participate turn into fan service instead of telling a good story?
That's a good question.
That is a good question too. I wonder about that too, like when books get turned into movies before the book is done. We can talk Harry Potter. How does J.K. Rowling not write to the movie fan base, not let the movies? They'll be very difficult, I would think, because I think in the back of my mind, if my book halfway through got turned into a movie, I'd be thinking, well,
what would the fans like to see?
What's it gonna? How will this fit the movie?
And you know what happens? It's the squeaky wheel that gets the grease. They have, there might be 1 million fans out there that love this role-playing game or this book or this movie, but there are, out of that 1 million fans, there is 50,000 of them that are absolute screaming, psychotic fanatics that are making the most noise.
Yep.
And those are the ones that are going to get pandered to. And while the rest of those fans are like, well, I was fine with it the way it was.
Right. And every huge franchise is like that. And I can see both sides of it a lot of times. Vic saying, my bad, couldn't tell, meaning the Ben Bishop goalie or Ben Bishop, the comic book guy. Yeah. That's okay. Every franchise has that, and seeing how the creator side of it, how they want to tell their story and continue doing it. And I do want to err on the creator side, because meaning, I guess that's tough, because the original creator, like a lot of times when things like Star Wars, I feel like it's just by committee just gotten crazy in so many instances. And I honestly haven't watched a lot of it because I don't want to keep ruining it from what I like, and that is just me, and so be it. If you like what they're putting out, great. From the creator standpoint, I would think, stick to your guns, keep telling the story you want.
I agree. I am totally for that. But then when you get into the interactive side of it, and I know that I haven't really looked at or studied up on it too much now, but there is actual interactive writing that on the internet now, that it's not round robin, but it allows you to dictate how these stories go. I was looking on the line here, and there's actual
isn't
programs.
it something where the fans vote on what to do next, or suggest things? And I've read something about some of that.
Yes.
I don't know. I don't know how to feel about that. But
yeah, because again, you could go off track so badly.
Yeah.
You could start out on point A. Well, here's a really good example. So when you're going on a trip and you're doing your little Google Map thing, you start at point A, but you also want to stop in Duluth, Minnesota on your way to Fargo, on your way to Seattle. But somehow in Duluth or in Fargo, all of a sudden you make a U-turn and go to Texas. I mean, what you run the risk of having a fairly decent plot with story plots along the way, and all of a sudden heading in an absolutely opposite direction of where you wanted to go. And how do you get that back on track then?
Yeah.
Because the fans have stolen the bus and they're driving.
I guess though that's the chance you take, and I think everybody needs to have mutual buy-in from all involved, and they have to know that if that democracy wants to run it off the cliff, or it could turn into something amazing, which I guess maybe is the same premise with Dungeons and Dragons, because you have to.
Yeah.
Now, Dungeons and Dragons is a bit more controllable, because if you've got 5 or 6 people sitting around a table and one person wants to be an obnoxious moron, it's a good idea usually to ask that person to not come back.
Also, Dungeons and Dragons has a DM.
Yes, someone to rein it in. Yes, someone to say, no, you're not going to do that. It's not going to happen.
You failed your saving throw. You're dead.
Right? Yeah. Nope. Yeah. I always I don't know if Rob, your phrase is when someone asks something absurd, I always say, you can certainly try.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you how difficult
exactly.
it is. Go, yeah, sure, roll. D20. Yeah, roll your D20. Nope. Doesn't work. Sorry.
Doesn't work. Yeah.
Doesn't work. That's how you control the story. Yeah. The interactive side with you when you have people voting or whatever to control it. There was, and I'm gonna probably goof this up to my cousin John if you're listening. Somewhere in the Warhammer world, I believe it was, with a rogue trader. They wrote their Warhammer world, like you're saying, Barb, and they at gaming conventions where people would play the game, and they would continue their storyline from the outcome of the games, meaning the tabletop with the dice and the stats and the wins and that's how which I think is kind of cool. I think it's really cool because it's not voting. It is some chance, but it's like, so you have your fantasy world all up here of the Warhammer, the concept of it. And the only way it's really going to be real, unless we're in the year, 24 whatever or 40K, where we have these mechs, that's as real as it's going to get at the tabletop. So let the battle play out, and let the battle. That's the real battle for all intents and purposes. I might have my information mixed up, but there was something like that in the early days where that was in the days where.
That is a really intriguing idea. So here's a concept. So you get a popular game or story, and you start a national competition, and it's small competitions, and the person who wins that competition, their story gets integrated into the story, and then so it goes a little bit, and then you have another competition, and the winner of that gets integrated into the story, and that would be super popular.
It would have to be with something that's nationally recognized. I think it would be tough. It'd be tough from the ground, to take Steam Patriots. I don't know, and create the Steam Patriots world, and then I'd have to have a game. That would be tough. But if like
have competitions,
right? If Wizards of the Coast decided they wanted to create a new novel or a new set of modules, they would have buy-in, instantly. They have
you choose the story by winning the competitions, and people would flock to those competitions.
Yeah, I think they really would. That's a fantastic idea. We got a question here from Steam Patriots VIP, Richard Dunn. Can you give me an example where fan fiction affected the continuance of the original creator's ongoing storyline? Ooh, good question.
No, I can't think of any, but
yeah, the original creator allowed fan fiction to change their story. If I assume, because most of the time I think
the death of Jason Todd at DC is the only thing I can think of that's close to that.
When was that?
When Robin was killed off, they voted on whether to kill off Robin. It was Jason Todd had taken over the role of Robin in the Batman books.
Okay.
And there was a vote amongst the fans as to whether he would survive an encounter with the Joker or not.
Kill him off.
1988. I just had to look that up.
They killed him off.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and they ended up killing him off. Yeah, they brought him back later, but still.
Yeah, they do that in comics. So that was a vote, and Mr. Dunn is asking.
There hasn't been like major changes. I've seen a few TV shows, where they will throw a bone to the squeakiest wheel, and it won't be a huge bone, but it'll just we want these two characters to kiss, or whatever like that, and they may we'll let them kiss and get these guys off their backs. It's always small things that they will give into. They won't change the major storyline or plot line, But if there's enough online screeching for certain things, they might hint at them or throw them a little bone, get them in the same room together, have them look longingly into their eyes or whatever, and they call it good. So they can influence, but they cannot change. I haven't seen any major changes, but I've seen TV shows throw small little tidbits to the rabid crowds.
So I did a quick search for it. I'm seeing the canon of Ready Player One. It's just a quick. Someone is saying, I can't say for sure if it's correct. Someone wrote fan fiction and gave a character a backstory, and the author liked it and declared it canon. So I don't know if it's changing the story because you're actually just giving someone a backstory. That's kind of fun. I kind of like that, allowing people to write what's not written, add to it. Because as an author, like if I wanted to say, oh, someone needs to give such and such a backstory, that's kind of cool. Because now
that'd be another great competition.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I think people like the side of it of you participating, which is what we're talking about here, the interactive. Mm-hmm. So for that, this might be a great idea. We're on to something.
One thing we did in Cat and Mouse, the first or the second book, is that we allowed some of our backers. We had like 4 or 5 slots. We allowed them to purchase an appearance in the next book.
Yes. Yeah.
That was fun.
Yeah, we did that too. We got 2 people, and neither of them are in the second one because they just not getting the screen time I wanted to give them. So, and actually one of those is Steam Patriots VIP Richard Dunn. I got a plan for you, Rick. But he knows that. So going back to the D&D, and you got that one moron. Vic says, yeah, I'm the bard. So I am that moron. The bard. Yeah. Vic, there was a great PlayStation game. I keep dating myself. My video gaming pretty much stops at PlayStation 2. A Bard's Tale is so great. It's such a great game, and I'm sure they've updated it so you can play it. I think it's A Bard's Tale. Really good. And but the new D&D movie with Captain Kirk in it, he's a bard as the protagonist. So if you guys haven't seen the trailer for it, it looks good. It looks like they actually do D&D in movie form, not just a dumb fantasy movie that they call D&D, but it looks fun. Chris Pine. Pine is, yeah.
I thought you were talking about William Shatner. I'm like, oh my God, please.
I did too. Well, that wouldn't work.
No, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Not work.
We've
seen him sing before, and it's painful.
We have seen him sing Rocket Man.
Rocket Man.
His whole album. And if William Shatner or if Leonard Nimoy was still there, he could join him in song. And what was the? Oh my gosh, the Leonard Nimoy songs, but
I'm going to sing a song.
The Bilbo Baggins song. Has anyone seen that? The Leonard Nimoy Bilbo Baggins.
Oh,
Barb, you've not seen it?
No.
Barb, we're gonna this is gonna go up. Oh, it's fantastic. So Vic is chiming in on Robin. Here we go. Yeah, he's saying
Jason Todd.
Yeah, he said apparently most of the calls to kill him were from one phone.
See, that's where the squeaky wheel, wheel got the grease.
Saying it must have cost a lot because 40 cents per minute. So in 1988, one person must have really wanted him to die.
I don't think it was one person. I think it was more than one. But there was a movement that sprang up of people. There was a handful of people that said, it's 40 cents a minute. Let's just nail him. Let's just kill him. And they ended up doing it. So but I mean, like I said, they eventually brought it back. But I think they even brought him back as a villain. So
Yeah, I
Red
had to
Hood,
look
wasn't
him
it?
up.
He's the Red Hood.
Yeah,
I wasn't following things at that point.
No, he's
But,
Red Hood
yeah,
now.
I
So
believe
yeah,
that's
he is
right.
very morally ambiguous.
Mm.
Well,
Well, he was not a very nice character to start with.
He's
So
still not a nice character.
yeah.
I think so. Correct me if I'm wrong here. We're coming. We're all sort of agreeing, and that a level of interactivity can be good. And if in the comic book world we could come up with a way to do it, which they have, 1988, it was with a phone call, and I'm sure if we did some more research, how the comic book world has allowed readers to drive storytelling or be involved, I'm sure there's a more modern example, and I just haven't found that yet. I did not.
Online poll.
Web comics. There's
Yep.
web comimes, web comics, and an online poll would work. Yeah,
And that's the allowing the reader to choose how the story's going to go, but also within the story, there are lots and lots of options now. As a reader, just how you can click. I closed the tab. With webcomics now, as you can choose which panel you go to, how the balloons spring up. That's another level of interactivity where, again, a static image doesn't give you that. I think it has a place. I can say, of course, the market wants it. That's video games. That's what video games are, and all the big games that have more than this level of playability.
I think I've said it here before, is that I think video games are the next big storytelling medium, and because it has that interactive possibility with it as well, that it's going to be interesting to see where that goes, because so far the storytelling has been pretty focused on that. There's a beginning, middle, and an end from a writer. But if you start getting it where there's more interactive, it could go anywhere. It'd be just like a D&D campaign where you've got the dungeon master who has started things, and then kind of built the basic world, and then suddenly it goes off the rails and goes any old directions. So there could be some really interesting stuff. It could go really, really bad, or it could go really, really good.
Wouldn't you want to have some parameters at least? I mean, like, say we were doing Oregon Trail and it goes off the rails and they land on Mars. I mean, it's not the Oregon Trail.
I think the parameters that are set by the game master or the dungeon master in this, if you're talking D&D.
So if you're setting a world that's
the setting of the world,
like pre-firearms, you have to set a limit. Okay, this is a pre-firearm world. You cannot introduce a firearm. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
You can do anything else, but
you have to go. And if you do, you have to go through the stages of how they were introduced. You have to discover gunpowder, and then you have to take the correct steps.
You can't just do a Deus ex machina and just
the black hole just burped out a gun for you to use.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think, really, I think we're on the road to, I don't know how far out it is. I'm frequently surprised by how quickly technology does something and how it's just exponential, just always exponential.
Yeah.
I think we're on the road to like a Ready Player One world where people put on the suit and enter into, because already in one of the VR meta games, it's made for, it's very kid-like, and your person is very basic, but you run around and you can go and play paintball. You can go to a sword fighting room and a flying, and so that's your world, and you just run around and with your headset on, and you can talk to people and so forth. But that's the very basics of something like a Ready Player One world, where there are world.
You want to get metaphysical about the whole thing. There are people that postulate that the universe we live in is a video game.
Oh yeah, yep.
It's a simulation.
We are a
Yeah.
VR game, huh?
Yeah, and
we already are a VR guy. But now we're going to go into the.
You're postulating a Horton Hears a Who
Oh
universe.
my, yeah. So we do have an addition. We'll say hello. Good evening, Aaron Humphreys. Hey, we're talking. I'll clue you in here in just a second, but I'm going to give Vic a moment here. We've been talking D&D, Aaron, because interactive storytelling and so forth.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Interesting.
Yeah, he's not that bard. I'm a Dragonborn bard, so he's less of a menace. Oh goodness, bards are still a menace. You can't help it. Just the bard. Here, let me play it too.
We've been covering the entire history of interactive, starting with round robins, and then it went to choose your own adventure, and then
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, then it was D&D, and now we're getting up into video games, and now we're into VR.
Yeah, we've talked about like where this Vic says keep Red Hood's name.
Out of your mouth. He has a reason to not be mean. Batman just let his killer walk.
Yeah. Okay.
He can be soft.
Okay. So in setting the parameters for our VR world that we'd enter into or whatever, make the Japanese hand cannons before you make your flintlocks.
Exactly.
Makes sense. It would have to make sense within the world. But yeah, Aaron, you can take us wherever. Did you ever play the Sierra games, King's Quest and Quest for Glory? Did you remember those?
No.
They were
I think I remember. What's it called? King's Field?
King's Quest was the first set, and then Quest for Glory came out, and you were as a little fantasy setting, and you'd walk around and you'd talk to people, and you'd ask about something, and they'd give you a task, and you have to find something and fight somebody.
I mean, most modern RPGs. Sorry.
Yep.
My phone. I'm going to turn my phone down so you're not hearing dings. I apologize. I didn't realize it was on.
But yeah, that was one of the original. We talked about the original computer-based, text-based, choose your own adventure kind of game.
Oh yeah. Okay. He's talking the text-based.
Oh no. Well, then those spawned the King's Quest and so forth with the with a graphic space similar. You because you have to type, ask about, look at, and stuff like that. Pick up, get, drink, and you have to say all that. Zork and Return to Zork was another one. I'm talking later 90s, mid 90s. But then now we've gone into. I think we're on the road to a Ready Player One's type world. I don't know when that would happen. There's a lot that has to happen because if you're going to add in the tactile side of all of it, I'm sure
VR is getting there. I mean, I don't know about the newer headsets. My headset is pretty old, but there is an MMO. I don't know how popular it is, but there is an MMO on one of the VRs that is like massively multiplayer. So that would be as far as like entering a world. The most storytelling is really hard. Like in VR, especially really hard because since you can look everywhere, it's really hard to direct the eye to what you want to see. So, but yeah, it's funny that the probably one of the more ingenious storytelling is like the Dark Souls type games, where it's more the story is in the world. Like a lot of the stories in the item descriptions. You read the descriptions of the items and stuff, and that'll explain the overall backstory or lore of the world you're in. And you could choose to ignore that story or not. You could just play the game and kind of interpret it as you see fit, or you can follow the story, but it's not really in your face. Very interesting. It's almost like archaeological storytelling where you're digging through this world and figuring out what had gone on.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So and then there's like cutscene story. Yeah, interactive storytelling, they've done D&D, and I know I haven't played, but there's one where like you can be a game master and other people play. Like you can make your own world. So you could be a DM in the video game and control other players. So it's literally set up like D&D.
Oh wow.
So yeah, that's an interest. I've not done that yet, but I've heard people, I can't remember the name. There's a series of games that let you do that, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Have you played any VR games then?
Yeah, I have played. VR is still pretty limited. Just they're kind of getting their feet wet. There's not a lot of huge games. Most are shorter experiences.
Yeah.
Just because I mean, most things like most movies run at 32 frames a second. Most games smooth at 60 frames a second. But in order to combat motion sickness, VR has to run at like 120 to 200 frames a second.
See, that's what everybody's saying is that it makes them dizzy.
It makes them dizzy. It's definitely immersive. I mean, I have a VR headset. It's an older one. I mean, you definitely feel like you're there. I can't describe it any other way. It really does feel like
it really is immersive. Yeah.
As far as storytelling, it's still getting hard. They're more like short experiences with setup. But I know the Skyrim game that they put that in VR, and that's an entire RPG, and that was fun. Just because it's enormous. You can spend hundreds of hours in there.
Yeah,
that is the world that's built in Skyrim is just incredible. I haven't played it, but I've watched my adult son plays it, and it's the images are just incredible.
How many writers it would take to contribute to all the branches. It's like a tree. It was off on all these. How many what the Bible must look like on that thing?
Oh yeah, I think a lot of those things too are like just smaller stories interconnected. And I think they add to it too. Skyrim's also heavily modded. It's people love to mod that, so there's a lot of people have added stuff to it and stuff like that. But yeah, I never got into Skyrim.
So is it open source?
That much. I'm not sure if it's open source. I don't know if it's old enough that they will allow games. Skyrim's been ported to everything, so I think by now it may be enough that I think it's old enough that
I'm just wondering if that talking about interactive, if you can get into the guts of the game and add, say, there's this continent over here that hasn't been developed. You have some fan or some player who develops that section of the world, then that's the concept of that is pretty wild as well.
Well, they've made
if you open source it, that opens up a whole new universe of stuff.
I think like Half-Life, I think, was open source. I know the game Counter-Strike, which I still think goes on today, was a mod of Half-Life, and it became so popular the company bought the game and made it its own game. But it was like, so some people have made entire games off modding the game, and if it's popular enough, the company's like, well, let us sell it, and that counted. That's
there's fan fiction, same thing, getting grabbed up. Your comment, I think that's what this is in reference to, and about fully immersive until you punch a wall. You're talking while you're in VR. Or I love
you actually physically punch a wall.
Yeah,
there are some that you can stand and move. There have been. You can't. I think you can buy these, but they're handmade, so it's like a harness where you stand like in a ring, say like it's a belt around you, and there's like strings connected, so you can run in place and dodge and move, and it doesn't move you, but you can actually physically run in place and you're running in the game.
Right.
But I think those are handmade.
So
I don't
it's
know
almost a virtual holodeck. We're getting close to the holodeck.
Yeah. Now, okay, man, that's a technology. I don't.
Well, that's why it gets so dizzy, because VR, it's so real that when you are say I'm sitting here playing in my chair, if I'm walking in the game, my body thinks I'm walking. All intents and purposes, all my senses say I'm walking, but my body's not moving. So your brain gets confused. It can't figure out, well, you're walking, but you're not moving, so it messes up.
That you'll get motion sickness. That's how.
That's only happened to me once when I went on the Back to the Future game ride at Disney World, and I found myself going this on the ride, because I'm dodging things, and I actually I got motion sickness.
I will say that horror games in VR are probably the most intense experience. Some of those horror games. Play Resident Evil in those. It's worth it, because horror movies never bother me, but horror VR, but it's super fun to do VR. A lot of them are independent, like I said, experiences. You do.
I might as well just make a VR game about me getting eaten by a bear.
Well, there's all sorts of weird things. I mean, a lot of times in VR, like those games that put your head on different bodies, and that had a space one. I can't remember what it was called. And you could be a female pilot, and pretty soon your head's on top of her body. So look down, and I had boobs. I'm like, wow, that's what that feels like. Because it looks, for all intents and purposes, you're a woman. It's a trip. And so I'm like, wow, that's kind of a trip. But yeah, you can do that in some of them.
No, that's interesting, because when I first started playing D&D, which is kind of the beginnings of all this, The first time a character played a sex that wasn't their own,
Right.
it threw me a little bit, but it also opened my mind to the possibility. Okay, well, yeah,
Sure.
why not? I mean, let's take this fantasy, the next step.
Yeah.
Well, if you're willing to be an ogre, I mean, female.
Yep, female ogre. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
there's.
weird.
Is it in Munchkin? Has anyone played Munchkin?
They have a few variations. They have a ton of variations.
Yeah, I think it's in Munchkin where you get a card and your sex changes and then you lose a round because you're distracted. You can't play.
What?
I have what?
Oh, what?
Well, it's funny. I remember in Skyrim, you get on a horse in the game because you get on a horse.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was in VR in Skyrim, I got on the horse and I realized how tall it is. Like you really could look down. I was like, oh man, I forget how big horses are. Like you get a sense of scale. Yeah, it's definitely got some interesting scaling issues. But yeah, changing gender in VR is a trip sometimes, especially because if you play a woman in some games, the men will respond to you like, "Why are you?" Oh, that's right. I'm a lady.
Hey.
Yeah.
Vic saying can't wait for the real holiday. Vic, see, I there are so many questions that come from my mind for a real holodeck. I first of all, I think why not make the entire Enterprise or ship
they have
holodeck?
They have.
Can you imagine the litigation lawyers you would have to have for a real holodeck?
What's legal and what you can do in a
No,
holodeck?
I mean, getting sued. Well, I hurt my pinky.
In a holodeck.
Yeah.
There is a Star Trek VR game where you play on the various decks of Star Trek. And they give you scenarios to solve. Apparently, I heard it's really hard, but I've never been able to play it because it's a multiplayer, so everybody plays a role on the deck. You can play the original Enterprise, Next Generation, other ones, and they have entire VR missions where you try to. And I've heard it's hard, but I've not gotten any. I'm trying to find friends. I don't have a lot of friends in VR.
There's one because there is one where you're just the deck crew. And you fly the ship.
I think that's the one. Yeah.
Oh, it's so cool because, you're seated, so you're the helmsman, or you're tactical, or the captain, and you've got your uniform on and your hands, and you command and you talk to each other and you fly the ship. It's really cool. It gets a little clunky every time I played though. Like we can get 2 or 3 missions done, and then
it's a little clunky, but the experience of even getting one to work, it's pretty.
I mean, to be on the original Enterprise, and yet your hands are you flip
what was
switches.
So funny? I played a demo of a Star Wars demo. I have one of the game. I played a demo, and one of them I flew an X-wing. I didn't realize how long the nose of that plane was.
Yeah.
Like it was so long. I'm like, how do you control? Like seeing it, I'm like, oh my god, that thing goes way off.
Fly a TIE fighter, which is a ship with the biggest blind spots in the world.
Yeah, because you can't see around. It's like these huge things.
Vic saying he can't do horror movies or games. Vic, I love horror movies, but can't have one where I'm completely surrounded. Yeah,
the horror games you can't, like, if something scares you can't look away. It's constantly
when it's all around you. Oh, that's freaky. Yep.
They had because
even
there's
did it.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Your sound's off.
Mine.
Yeah, he's been.
Oh, me?
Is?
No, me. My sound is fine for me. I was just gonna say, Silent Hill, way back again, another early PlayStation game. That one freaked me out, and it wasn't immersive, but it was done really well with its scare factor.
They're remaking number 2.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I like Silent Hill.
Yeah, it was fun.
That was based on the heavily influenced by the movie Jacob's Ladder, which is a classic movie. Really well done.
Continuing with the VR theme, Steam Patriots VIP Richard Dunn says, as an ER nurse, we need to participate in these experiences to be ready for not nauseated patients who have no actual injuries. However, they have neurological effects from the VR gaming.
They can. Yeah.
They can psych themselves out into it.
They actually will tell people that 12 years and under not to play it. I still think because the eye is developing.
Yeah.
But you can't. I've heard that some people will actually use virtual reality to help people get over phobias and stuff.
Oh,
I've heard
okay.
that.
Nope.
Well,
Yeah, there are
yeah,
games.
that'd be a great use for that.
Nope, nope, nope,
Yeah,
nope,
yeah.
nope.
So I've actually heard people do architectural stuff where they'll like put your house in 3D and then you can walk through it virtually to see it.
Yeah.
So they've had some cool applications of the technology more than gaming. Gaming is what you see on the thing, but
Right.
a lot of people have done it to do some really fascinating things. Yeah.
I feel like the Ready Player One world, and I know I've beaten this drum, but I feel like that's where we're going to go, and we'll have the holdouts who won't, but there's going to be mass interest in that. If you could live in a little house and then enter a limitless world through a suit like in Ready Player One, why wouldn't you? And you could be whoever you want.
Well, you've heard of the iteration that's what's like continuous creation of like a universe. That, in other words, that idea, if we're living in a matrix sort of world, that we are like few generations back. Like, in other words, the original people made a matrix world, we escaped into it or download ourselves into it, and then over time in the matrix world we develop VR and go to the next iteration. So we're literally continuously going into numerous digital worlds. So the universe is digital in and of itself. We just keep upgrading as our technology advances, and we develop, like, we're at the stage of developing VR, and then eventually we'll escape into it, and then it'll be the next iteration of reality. It's a science fiction idea. It's an interesting one to think about.
Yeah.
You know what I'd love to do with VR is I would like to travel the world.
You can.
Yeah.
You kind of can. It's not
You could
quite.
actually
It's pretty darn close though.
Like,
the one thing
go to Scotland and to have somebody walk around and see all the sites that I'd want to see, and that would be interactive because I could like choose to go to Edinburgh or go to Inverness or whatever, and choose where to go.
You can't really choose. I think they have some. I know they have one you can walk on Mars, and it's actually taken from actual photos of Mars. So it's as fat as much you can create.
That would be cool.
And I have not been able to figure out how to download it because I don't have a PC. Cool. I do a PlayStation, but they've done other ones where you've been able to spacewalk and experience that a little bit. VR is definitely a trip. It's got some really I mean, the technology is just getting better.
I'm afraid I would get addicted. I would get the little house. I would do exactly what you were saying. Just get a little house. I wouldn't need much of anything. I wouldn't need comics. I could have them virtually.
Yeah, virtually.
My whole comic book collection could be virtual. In fact, I can collect books that it's impossible for me to get now. So
and then before you know it, you're without in the Matrix.
Really? Yeah, I mean, Avatar,
exactly.
Avatar, right? Like,
it's tube of food and just have
the drawing programs. There's drawing programs,
or an IV
the drawing programs are crazy.
And then we'd lose our bodies, and all we'd have left is our brains.
Walk through your drawings.
Oh man,
there's Rory.
Hello.
Take your time to pull it all out of the fire.
How long is that thing getting now?
You have missed a great conversation. Just give me one moment.
Yeah.
Vic, yes, this is an excellent question. How do we write interactive comics? We'll get to that one in just a second. Aaron, you're making his brain hurt. Yeah, with the theory of
with
we
the
are
Matrix
living
iterations.
in a simulation. Yes. Rory, folks, everybody out there, thank you so much. We are coming towards the end. Rory, we're so glad you're here. We know you are studying studiously and diligently, and you are top of your class. We welcome you. We've been talking about interactive storytelling, from everything from choose one's own adventure to text-based video games to the so on and so forth of Heroes Quest and so forth to modern video games and how does it work in the written format? But yes, if we could, while we get towards the end, is it possible to make it work for comic books? Now, I think digitally, and Rob mentioned that, web comics and digital comics is a lot easier. Bar brought it up too, and I said, if we're doing this in print, think about the cost to have an artist write. Okay, we got one comic, and then we branch off
each
and then
iteration.
draw the other.
Right.
Yeah. Each
The
iteration.
amount of work that goes into it to make it interactive, I do think comics are very, very limited, and they may have to just stand on their own merits and do what they do best.
Well, the only way that would work is if you did an online poll and then you didn't move on to your story until the poll was completed. Okay, then the next step.
Is it
have
like
another
the
online
Simpsons
poll.
episode Futurama or Simpsons, where they're in the theater and everybody has to vote what the main character does, like double check paperwork or run out the door?
I don't remember that one. I don't remember.
Good.
But the level of interactivity, which is still very hard to define because I did a bunch of internet looking and searching, and no one can really define what interactive means. And I think really, if we just keep talking, we just have our own. We get it.
Yeah.
Full interactivity. We're talking holodeck, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and then we'd have to be at this AI, like artificial intelligence level that we're on the cusp of.
Did you guys ever, speaking of a holodeck, did you guys ever try to figure out how they're able to walk and not bump into a wall?
Right.
The only thing I can think of is that the ground must move.
The ground has some sort of trip, but I wonder, like, how can they get
away
away
from?
You can only get like 10 feet away from the other guy.
Never split the party.
You can't. Yeah, I thought about that too. You can walk, but how are you walking?
Do they go into another room? Because and some of them, like, they'll split and go on separate adventures in the holodeck. And I'm like,
the Robin Hood one, where they're off in the woods, and how?
I got it.
How many holodecks do you have to have next to each other?
Pocket
right, to
dimension.
connect to do that.
Yeah, another
Pocket
dimension. It's easy.
Yeah.
The Enterprise has some sort of interdimensional room. Just it's all contained.
Because when it's one person, it makes sense. Okay, he's just walking in place and doing that, and they're changing as they go.
Bigger on the inside.
But when they have parties where they separate, you're like, how is that possible?
Well, the thing is,
individual or co-op, only way to play that game.
If you look at maps of Enterprise D, that thing is huge.
Yeah,
and has huge empty spaces inside of it.
I think. Maybe that's also huge empty spaces because the designers got sick of figuring out.
They were calculating tonnage. They needed a lot of void.
Yeah. Well, you also get area. If you actually get the map, you'll actually see they have rooms for whales. For whale-type creatures,
just in case they have to travel back in time to the 1970s.
Strange enough,
somebody had some forethought
and beam one aboard.
The only thing I'm thinking is maybe, and this is just a theory. What if? Okay, this is going to make your brain hurt, Vic, even more. But if they're in the same room and they split off into an adventure, how do you know that the computer is not projecting a simulation for each individual person in that room? It's like, say they're walking in place on either side of the room, but each one is experiencing a separate environment, even though they're right next to each other.
Right next to each other.
Now that I could see,
because it's making tactile, tangible,
haptic,
holograms. So they would also have to be capable of stopping all sensory transmission,
like cutting the room in half,
or
something. So I don't know how that would work, but that's the only way I think was like they're literally next to each other, but due to the environment is projected.
You're not gone too far to give it that much thought. We got
a nitpick Star Trek.
Well, if you actually want to make a holodeck, we do need to give it that much thought, because
Well, absolutely, but we have to really. They're telling a story, and that was a device for it. You're not supposed to dive that deep into it. But there's rabbit hole.
Have you guys watched Lower Decks yet?
Not yet.
I guess
if you're a real Trek fan, which we know Rob is, because Rob's the expert. Rob is our Trek expert.
Yes, he is.
He spent his
time.
Got the
pedigree. Not for the new stuff since Discovery. I don't know what's going on with that. Although I have seen a couple of episodes of Strange New Worlds.
Is it good?
I love what I see.
Oh, good. Okay, I want to watch it. Yeah.
I'm waiting. I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait and get the DVDs. Good. I don't need Paramount Plus. I've already got Netflix.
Yeah.
And the money I would spend on renting, I can just buy the dang DVDs.
Yeah. Strange New Worlds was great. Discovery, I'm not really.
I saw the
I remember one of the things they were showing, like the Enterprises, like dogfighting, like they're actually going through space and dogfighting. The Enterprise doesn't dogfight. You know what?
Yeah.
You gotta make it. You gotta make it.
It's more like
sexy.
Submarine.
Yeah.
I watched Wrath of Khan over the weekend last week with
yeah.
my wife, and
Yeah,
the way they did that, that's the way
and of
space
course
battles are.
they add a
Real
nebula,
space
so you have the sense of movement, but so good. So Lower Decks is very funny for all of you Trek fans, especially Next Generation. It's in the Next Generation world, and there is an episode where somebody has
Star Trek
holodeck cleanup duty, and
God.
so if you just think about what goes on.
You know, the funny thing is I remember my friend talking if they were actually to do real space combat, which I mean TV's dead, you probably wouldn't even see the other ship. They would probably be doing lasers, something from like, I mean, you wouldn't be able to physically see them, but like light years. I mean, you're thinking of propagating the speed of light. I mean, you could now it would take if you're a light year away, it'd take 1 year to get there. But if you were not, I mean, it would literally be looking at your radar as a chessboard to figure out what the other ship is, because you wouldn't be able to physically see it. And since your ship can't emit light, if you just turn the lights off on your ship, it would be solid black. You wouldn't be able to see anything. So, I mean, it is weird to think that, but Star Trek, I mean, they got to keep it exciting. But in real life,
same thing. You think if there was a space battle like with X-wings and TIE fighters and Star Destroyers and all this stuff, and the amount of lasers and debris, it would be instantaneous destruction of everything. And think of firing lasers. They'd go on forever.
They'd propagate through the thing, especially if you're firing one powerful enough to literally cut through the ship. Yeah.
So all right, people.
And with gravity, take
stop.
the light of the laser.
We're talking about interactive.
Come on, DM. Come on, DM. Get it back on track.
Space.
I'm glad Star Trek made its appearance. We in the comic book world, I do think we are limited. I think we are limited, and we're pretty far. The comic book is pretty far from a holodeck. I'm sorry. I said it. Okay. The comic book, I will just reassert, just needs to be a really good story and do what it does best.
Agreed.
It can't try to be everything for everyone. The comic book needs to do what it does best. It is a great medium. Think, and I've said this before, the movie motion picture does not give you time to reflect and pause on a moment or a panel. It keeps moving. Fine.
Yep.
Comic book allows you to stop, think, go back if you need to. Comic book is your pace. Comic book has its merits. We could add interactivity. Barb, I love your idea of it, if including the readers in the story world. Rory, you missed it. In the Ready Player One world, he allowed a fan fiction, at least, according to somebody on the internet, fan fiction was allowed to become someone's backstory canon. That's kind of cool. If Scott Wakefield got to write, Ron Weasley's backstory, that'd be cool. Sure.
And we're toying with that idea.
We allowing some of our readers to be in the story as well. Visage.
There was a comic. I'm trying to remember what it was online, and I had to look this up. But I think the way it worked is the guy was writing the comic, but the people who were reading it could vote on where the story goes. So it was an interactive to a point. I can't remember the name. It was really famous for a while, and it ended.
How long ago?
Oh God, like maybe 4 or 5
years. That's the same idea we were having about doing a poll.
It was you could actually did it a print version to show you, because it was like experiment. They did decide and the story was done, but it was something like you could decide where it goes and people would go in and vote. And
it wasn't Penny Arcade.
No, it was something. It was a side. I have to ask my friend Tom got into it for a little bit. Was reading it and was curious about the voting and how that worked, but it was interactive with the audience to a degree.
Vic tells us to suspend our disbelief for Star Trek. Not going to happen, Vic.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
And the funny thing is, I think it works for Star Wars because, but Star Trek, when it starts to push that science, a little hard science, people start to think of how this really works. Nobody thinks about how a lightsaber would work.
Right. Yeah. Right. And no one thinks about
makes no sense.
Relativity
when you break
the people, movement of time, moving at multiple times the speed of light, what happens, all that sort of stuff. We have
after a few trips, the Federation would be gone.
Everybody would be dead and gone.
Yeah.
We are down to our last minute. I love the idea, and I'm going to declare and throw a gauntlet down here, or Vic is. We'll blame him if it's a bad idea. That I think Silverline, somewhere in our world, somewhere in our stories, we may need to add an element of a bit more reader interaction of some feedback.
Just put a metallic mirror page in somewhere.
We've got the shiny covers of Tommy. Rory, that's a great. Oh, I'm in the story, and have a speech bubble.
You're in the story.
Cool.
At the end, there'd be a survey. How much does Aaron suck? Vote yes, no.
You have chosen poorly.
Poorly.
I love that. So we need to look into how Silverline Comics can add a little more reader interactivity. Now we've got interactivity in almost everything we do with our Kickstarters and with us here and our shows. You got tidbits, you got little stories of Rob seeing the what he's creating. Not a Silverline story, but that's okay. Kickstarter is coming soon, guys.
Well,
Get out there.
It might be.
Ooh, we'll see. Okay, make sure you click get notified. Check us out on all of our socials as always. Like, follow, subscribe, share. We want to keep growing our audience because we're very thankful for all of you out there for joining us on our shows, for reading our comics. We've got a Kickstarter coming up soon. Stay tuned. And the Wednesday crew will see you next week. Dean will be back, and it'll be much better with Dean here. Infinitely better. And
he's a much better corral.
He's so much better. Thank you for letting me host, and for everybody out there, it's been fun. Thank you so much, and we're gonna call it a night. And before we do, we say make my Silverline. We gotta stay right there because I gotta find the end of our show. Okay, bye guys.
I'm April Hunter. Make mine Silverline.
All right.